Okay, imagine this for a second. What if the real secret to making complex stuff stick? Whether it's a dense scientific paper or maybe your next big business report, wasn't just what you're saying, but how you say it. Because
Right.
we're all drowning in information these days, right? Especially in fields moving super fast, like climate science. Feels like there's a new study, a new report practically every single day.
Oh, it's definitely more than just a feeling. The numbers really back that up. If you look at scholarly publications, say in climate science, like you mentioned, they're doubling something like every 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge amount. And that volume of new research, well, it just completely outstrips anyone's ability to keep up, really, let alone actually read it all or use it effectively.
Right, which is why today's deep dive feels so timely. We're digging into this really fascinating study that asks a pretty basic question, actually. In this absolute flood of information, does the style you write in change how often your work gets noticed, how often it gets cited?
Exactly. And they specifically looked at whether scientific abstracts that were more, let's say, narrative in style end up getting more citations. And citations, often used as a kind of proxy for a paper's influence or impact.
What I find really interesting there is how it shifts the focus. It's not just about the quality of the science itself, but also about how it's presented, how it's communicated.
Precisely. And our mission today is really to unpack those insights because what they found, well, it isn't just relevant for academics writing papers. It has some really profound implications, I think, for how you, listening right now, can make any kind of complex information. Maybe it's a presentation, a report, even technical documents, just much easier to grasp and ultimately more impactful.
Okay, so let's get into that. Why would telling a story basically make such a difference in something as, well, traditionally objective as scientific writing? Seems counterintuitive almost.
Well, it turns out our brains are just fundamentally wired for stories. There's decades of evidence now from psychology, literary theory, even neuroscience, showing pretty consistently that people understand and remember things better when they're presented as a narrative compared to, say, purely expository writing.
Hmm.
There are even specific brain regions, neural pathways that light up when we engage with a story. It suggests it's a really deep, almost primal way we process the world.
That's compelling stuff. But just so we're clear, how did this specific study define narrative writing versus expository writing, especially in the context of these short scientific abstracts?
That's a good question. So
Hmm.
narrative writing, in their view, is essentially telling a story through a sequence of connected events. There's a flow, right?
Hmm.
A progression. It often implies some kind of cause and effect or a timeline.
Okay.
Expository writing, on the other hand, is more about just relaying facts and observations,
Yeah.
often without much social context or temporal framing. It tends to stick to that logical if X then Y structure, really emphasizing objectivity.
And that really highlights the paradox, doesn't it? You've got this powerful tool for human understanding narrative, but professional science writing has traditionally leaned heavily the other way, towards that expository style.
Mm.
Objective observations, detached voice, that rigid logical structure.
Exactly. It's kind of
Yeah.
strange when you think about it. And yet, if you step back a bit, you see narratives are already used really successfully in, say, popular science writing.
Right, to grab the public's attention.
Precisely. They're great at capturing attention, sometimes spurring action on important issues, even shaping how the public perceives risks or thinks about policy. So this study was really asking, okay, does that power extend into the scientific community itself within its own literature?
Okay, so they want to measure narrativity in these short abstracts. How did they actually go about quantifying something like that? Sounds tricky.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And their approach was quite innovative, actually. They took 732 scientific abstracts, all from climate change literature, published between 2009 and 2010. And they focused just on the abstracts because, well, that's usually the first thing anyone reads. It's that consistent entry point. And sometimes, frankly, it's the only thing people read.
Right, and I think I read they use crowdsourcing, which seems unusual for this kind of analysis. How did that work?
It is unusual, but yeah, they used a platform called Crowdflower. Essentially, they paid a bunch of individuals to independently assess how narrative each abstract felt.
Hmm.
And to make sure the quality was good, they were pretty strict. They only used the platform's highest rated contributors. They set a minimum time limit so people couldn't just rush through it. And they limited it to contributors in English-speaking countries with high literacy rates, places like the US, Canada, the UK.
Okay, that makes sense. Quality control.
Definitely. And each abstract was judged by multiple people. 7, actually, which helps account for the fact that judging narrativity is inherently a bit subjective.
So what were these contributors actually looking for? What were the specific things, the indicators that signaled narrativity to them?
They broke it down into 6 key elements, which they derived from work in psychology and literary theory. So first was setting. Did the abstracts mention a specific place or time? Give us some context.
Right.
Second, narrative perspective. Was there a clear narrator? And interestingly, they looked for first-person pronouns I, we, our.
Huh. Which is often discouraged in traditional science writing.
Exactly. But here, its presence was seen as a sign of a more narrative approach. Third was sensory language. Did the abstract appeal to senses, emotions, or express attitudes or beliefs? Did it go beyond just the dry facts?
Got it.
Fourth, conjunctions, words like because, so, while then, words that connect phrases and signal things like cause and effect, contrast, or temporal order. These are really crucial for building that sense of flow.
Right, linking ideas together. What were the last two?
Fifth was connectivity. This was about explicit links between sentences, things like repeating key terms or just generally making it really clear how one thought flowed logically into the next. And finally, number 6 was appeal. Did the abstract make some kind of explicit appeal to the reader? Or offer a clear recommendation for action? Basically, did it answer the why should you care question?
Fascinating. So those are the narrative elements, and I know they also controlled for other things known to affect citations, right? Like
Yeah.
how long the abstract was, number of authors, the year, the journal's impact factor.
Yes, they collected data on all those standard variables as well.
So they've got all this data. What was the big headline? What did they find when they put it all together?
Well, the core finding was pretty striking. Articles with abstracts judged as being more narrative were cited significantly more often.
Really?
Yeah. And importantly, this effect held up even after they accounted for things like the publication year, the number of authors, or even how long the abstract was. The narrative style itself seemed to have this distinct positive impact on citations.
Wow. Okay, so out of those 6 narrative elements they measured, did any particular ones stand out as being, the most important drivers of those citations?
Good question. Yes. 4 of the 6 were significantly and positively linked to more citations. Those were sensory language, conjunctions, connectivity, and appeal.
Oh.
And interestingly, the one with the single biggest positive influence was connectivity.
Ah, the flow between sentences.
Exactly. It really suggests that making those explicit links, ensuring a clear logical progression from one idea to the next, truly helps people process, understand, and it seems, value and reuse the information later.
That totally makes sense. When you're reading something dense, having those clear connections is just invaluable. You don't get lost.
Precisely.
Now, what about the journal itself? Was there a link between how narrative and abstract was and, say, the prestige or impact factor of the journal it appeared in?
Yes, and this was another really interesting and actually unexpectedly strong finding. Higher impact journals tended to publish articles with more narrative abstracts.
Huh.
And of course, articles in higher impact journals generally get cited more often anyway. So it raises this intriguing question.
Yeah.
Why? What's going on there?
Right. Is it the journal demanding that style or something else?
The study floats a few possibilities. It could be editorial policies, maybe subtly favoring or guiding authors towards a more narrative style, or perhaps higher impact journals, especially the big ones like Nature or Science that aim for a broader audience. Maybe they need that narrative style to communicate effectively across different disciplines.
Or, like they also suggested, maybe it's that more senior, established authors, the ones often publishing in those top journals, just feel freer to break from the purely expository mold and write more narratively.
That's another very plausible explanation. They've maybe earned the credibility to do that. Whatever the exact reason or combination of reasons, the correlation was strong.
So putting it all together?
Well, while the journal itself, especially its impact factor, was still the strongest single predictor of citations overall. Which isn't too surprising. The narrative style clearly had its own significant independent positive effect. And when you combine the narrative score with other factors like the journal, the year, number of authors, they could explain about 41% of the variation in citation counts, which is pretty substantial.
41%. Yeah, that's quite a bit. So, okay, let's pivot a little. What does this mean for us, beyond climate science papers? The study itself hints it probably applies more broadly in science.
Oh, absolutely. I think the study's authors are right to suggest this likely applies to scientific literature much more broadly.
But I'm thinking even wider than that. This seems incredibly relevant for basically any field where you need to communicate complex information clearly and make it stick.
I completely agree. The big takeaway here isn't just about getting citations. It's about optimizing how your message, whatever it is, gets received, understood, and hopefully acted upon by your audience. So yeah, the technical documentation, business reports, presentations, internal comms, you name it.
Right. You can consciously try to weave in some of these narrative elements to make things resonate better.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's try and make that practical. Take technical documentation, for example. That's often notoriously dry. How could you apply something like sensory language there? Seems tough.
It does, but maybe it's not about being overtly emotional. It's more about making abstract concepts feel a bit more tangible, more relatable. So instead of just saying, the system processes data, maybe you can say something like the system digests the raw input, transforming it into actionable insights. See? It's more vivid, more active.
Ah, okay. Using stronger verbs, maybe analogies.
Exactly. Analogies to things people already understand can be really powerful for explaining complex functions.
And what about connectivity? That one had the biggest impact in the study. How does that play out in, say, a user manual?
That's absolutely crucial in tech docs. It's about ensuring that logical flow, making the links between steps explicit. It means not just listing what to do, but maybe briefly explaining why you're doing a step, or how it connects to the previous one, or what the overall goal is.
Right.
Using connecting phrases like, as a result of doing X, or to achieve Y, you first need to. It stops the reader from just feeling like they're following a random list of instructions and helps them build a mental model of the process.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Prevents them getting lost. Now, appeal. That one feels like it could be tricky in objective technical writing. You don't want to sound like you're selling something, right?
Right. It's not about making some kind of dramatic plea. It's more subtle. It's about framing the why for the reader. Why should they care about this feature or this procedure? What problem does this information solve for them specifically?
Focusing on the benefit.
Exactly. What action do you want them to take, and what will they gain by doing it? So instead of just, this function optimizes database queries, maybe try. This function optimizes database queries, which means significantly faster load times for your users and a much smoother experience. You bring the benefit directly to them. It creates an immediate relevance.
Nice. And quickly, what about setting and perspective? How do they fit into something like a software guide?
Well, setting is about context. Where does this particular procedure fit into the bigger picture, the overall workflow? When should you use this feature versus another one? Providing that context up front can be really helpful.
Okay.
And perspective, while you probably wouldn't use I or me, using we can work. We designed this feature to, or our testing showed that. It establishes a clear voice, a sense of authority, and helps guide the reader. It sort of builds a subtle relationship.
So wrapping this up, the big so what for you, the listener, seems to be that weaving in these narrative elements isn't about, dumbing things down or sacrificing objectivity.
Not at all.
It's more about acknowledging how our brains actually work, how we naturally process information and make sense of the world.
Exactly. It's about aligning your communication, even for very technical or objective information, with those inherent cognitive processes. And by doing that, you can seriously increase the chances that your message, whatever it is, actually lands, gets understood, and has the influence you want it to have.
It's just recognizing that even the most factual information benefits when it's presented in a way that clicks with how we're built to learn.
Well put.
So here's something to think about. Considering how powerfully our brains seem hardwired for stories, how might intentionally weaving just a few of these narrative threads, maybe better connectivity, a clearer appeal, some context into your next report or presentation or even a technical manual, how might that transform its impact? How could it ensure your ideas don't just get read, but actually resonate and get remembered?